What's up, guys? Cody with CJC Off-Road, and today is going to be another question and answer session. Thanks to you guys for submitting good questions on our social media feeds. Just jumping right into our questions today. Our very first question is King versus Fox shocks. So for that one, I'll let Cole handle it.
All right, so this is a question that we receive all the time. What's better, King or Fox shocks? And the honest answer to that is it really depends. I wouldn't necessarily go by King versus Fox as a brand, but rather by application. As it stands in our small little niche here of Dodge and Ford diesel trucks, the main differences usually with King and Fox actually are most of the brands that we deal with specifically offer their Fox shocks usually in 2.0 and King shocks as 2.5 or bigger shocks. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the King is a better shock. Well, actually, the Fox 2.0 that we sell versus the King's obviously the nicer shock, but that is just happens to be how these manufacturers we deal with selected their shock platforms. So there are a lot of things to take into consideration. Obviously, one being the budget, right? Not everyone needs the big King 2.5 shocks. A well-tuned Fox 2.0 for a daily driver or commuter, it's actually a really good option.
And that's why Fox, not to chop them up, but Fox offers a shock that they're pre-building to these manufacturer specifications at a much cheaper price point, right? Like the King shocks, Carli's are assembled. It is a literally hand-assembled shock that they're putting their tuning in, while Fox, with their 2.0s, it's literally a mass manufactured shock to their specifications. So price point-wise, as he says, just a huge spread.
Yeah, it's amazing because with a Fox 2.0 shock, you get a nice custom tuned shock for, basically $160, $150 a piece. Something it's not really achievable with King shocks. So I'd say a lot of this is really how are you going to be using the truck and what are your goals for the suspension on your truck. That said, there are other things to take into consideration. So the weather, climate is a very big one. Fox shocks do typically have aluminum bodies, which are fairly corrosion resistant, although most of the Fox 2.0s still actually use chrome-plated shafts. King 2.5s, at least as Carli specs them, or as Thuren gives the option, they actually can be ordered with stainless shafts, or they come standard with stainless shafts from King. This is a huge benefit because back in the day when you'd hear people talking about Fox or King shocks, the biggest complaint was, why are all these shocks leaking? So Carli and actually Thuren now with stainless shafts are solving a lot of this problem by using stainless shafts. And what used to happen with chrome-plated shafts is the shafts would pit, pitted shaft tears the shock seal, and then the shock starts leaking. This has actually been significantly reduced since these companies started using stainless shafts. Back in the day, we'd be taking rebuild shocks in all the time.
Yeah. The chrome shafts, they would get a rock hit. The chrome would flake, and then a sharp edge would, basically form a burr, and that would travel up into the shock and tear the seal. These stainless shafts that the manufacturers have now are leaps and bounds better. Just for durability, but like you said, the weather, the stainless shaft is huge. But then that parlays us into the downside of a King shock. Probably the one downside of like a King shock package is going to be the steel body. Exactly. That he mentioned. And so for those of you in like the Northeast and things like that, where the road is salted regularly, or the Great White North, if it's salted regularly and there's a lot of corrosives used on the road, the King shocks can get pretty ugly. That's like one of the main complaints we see. So one of the things you can do to fix that is either there's ceramic coating out there, 3M, like just basically an adhesive wrap around it, like a clear wrap, like a lot of guys use on like the bra of their car and so forth. But one thing I want to comment on is so many people say, why would I buy these expensive shocks just to watch it corrode? Well, you also bought an $80,000 truck that can also corrode. So maintenance is required. If you leave it out in the salt, if you dunk the truck in the ocean, the whole thing is going to rust, So you need to keep that in mind. Maintenance is going to be key. You're buying a premium shock, and with that, there are some steps that are required to make it last a long time. But, if you are eyeballing those shocks, we have a ton of videos on those, shock packages and the benefits of them. And if you can swing it, they're definitely worth it.
So basically, to summarize, I'd say your shock selection should really be based on your particular usage. A simple daily driver setup where you're just looking for a softer ride, Foxes actually work great, but so do Kings. So I'd say, a few factors to consider. Just how long do you plan on keeping the shocks? Would you rather have something you can rebuild versus throw away when it's done? Things like that. And again, we always have our phones open here, so we're more than happy to answer any questions to actually help aid you in selecting the perfect shock for your truck.
All right, so still a question we get daily: what wheels to fit 37s on my Ram 25 3500 or my Ford Super Duty? Now, on both of these, we're going to reference really quick basically the 97 and up Dodges. We can kind of follow the same template, and the probably 08 to 11 and up Ford Super Duties all the way to current models. On the Rams, we have a ton of videos on some very specific wheels, some CJC Off-Road Edition wheels, 5 3/4 inch backspacing. We drill this number into your guys' heads, but so many guys ask, what's the offset? Well, offset depends on the wheel width. So, with our methods, that's a plus 25 wheel. On some other wheels, it's a plus 18. So anywhere in that window of a positive offset, that's going to get you enough clearance for the minimum amount of trimming to run 37s on a Dodge. And so, so many people ask us, why do I want a positive offset? Wouldn't that, make my truck stick out more? Things like that. Offset numbers and backspacing numbers can be really confusing. So instead of second guessing it, just trust these numbers that 5 3/4-ish backspacing range and the plus 18 to plus 25-ish offset range. That's going to get you where you need to be. Zero offset is not good. They can still fit with a lot of trimming. It's not ideal, and so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. Don't get too far lost in the numbers. Just shoot for these target numbers and you'll be okay. On the Ford trucks, the 08 and up, and then the 11 to 16 trucks, 37s will require some trimming. Again, if you shoot for a more positive offset wheel. Unfortunately for the Fords, the best on that year, what do you think? 5-inch backspacing, I think, is where we've seen the perfect number. But that's usually only available on a custom order wheel or a 20 or an 18-inch wheel. It's not typically offered in 17s.
Or a plus 18 offset on an 11 plus Ford. If you do about plus 18 offset, a 37 by 1250 tire. This usually is kind of happy medium for some people. So what happens is the tire may still slightly contact the sway bar and radius arms at full lock, but in most cases it does not. Which brings me to something else related to Ford wheel clearance. A lot of guys are trying to run stock wheels on their newer Super Ds with 37s. These setups do rub the sway bar and the arms quite a bit. Carli does have a new sway bar option for the 17 plus Fords. This has actually opened up a lot of possibilities as far as clearance. In fact, this plus 18 offset I just mentioned is actually clearing really well with 37 1250s on the new Fords.
Yes, a quick product plug. If you are touching your sway bar now with 37s on a 17 and newer Ford, the sway bar is going to fix it. It's going to give you a better ride. So that's a huge benefit, but then, being able to turn into a parking spot with these big trucks is also a huge benefit. My personal truck, 5-inch backspacing, 37 by 1350 Toyota MTs, I rubbed my sway bar until I got the new sway bar, and I'm now going lock to lock without touching anything. So
we've even put stock wheels on the new Fords with that. It still rubs the arms pretty good, but believe it or not, I'd say the truck is actually kind of drivable, which really
without spacers, right?
Yeah.
So some of these guys telling you, 37s fit on your stock wheels, things like that. They're all running spacers. Personally, I'm against it, but it's one of those things. Certain people will do it, but I'm not for it. But this is all in reference to the 17 plus trucks. We do have a whole other video highlighting the trimming on those. If you do that trimming that you see in that video on those trucks, it really does open up the door for backspacing kind of variance there. So you can actually run a wider wheel with a 37 and not rub. You just have to trim that piece of metal inside the fender. I think it's a lot scarier than it is, because once you do it, you stand outside your truck, you can't tell you chopped anything, even though you did cut a piece of metal out, out of inside the fender well. A lot of guys worry, these trucks are costing about $80,000 for these fully loaded trucks, so people are horrified of chopping them. But you're really not hacking. It's not like the days where you saw your Uncle Buck and you just took a hatchet to the side of the truck. It's not like that. There's no SEMA beaver, is what they call it. You don't have any of that. You just have this little piece of metal you cut, bam, 37's fit.
Keep in mind, these Ford specs do pertain to leveling height. If you're going taller, say 4.5, it's much easier.
Same with Dodge, really. All these numbers we always talk about, we're so tied in on the systems that we use. So these are all at leveling 3-inch heights, things like that.
Exactly. So the next question we received is, how does running, say for instance, a 17-inch wheel with a 37-inch tire differ from running a 20-inch wheel with a 37-inch tire in terms of ride quality? It's actually a great question. It's one that we receive all the time. So I actually test drive every single truck that comes through here. So every time we put suspension under a truck, I'll do the final alignment and test drive on it. So I'm very familiar with how basically different wheel and tire combinations affect ride quality. Believe it or not, there actually is still a pretty sizable difference between how a 17 and 37 combo rides versus a 20 and a 37. The 20 and 37 trucks still give quite a bit of actual road feedback. 17s and 37s do a lot better job with that additional 1.5 inches per side of sidewall at basically numbing what you're feeling on the road. Carli calls this small bump compliance. It's a very common term used around here. And, keep in mind, you can still get a greatly improved ride with 20s and 37s.
Yeah, so if you do have 20s and 37s, 22s, even 24s, 37s, it's not to say that like a good suspension system is not going to improve the ride. It's just don't expect to drive over a lane indicator and not feel it. The suspension can't absorb it. If your suspension could absorb a 1-inch, lip on your truck, when you hit your brakes, the front bumper would slam the ground. If you swerve on the highway, it'd be like driving a boat. It just wouldn't work. So, yeah.
Actually, on our personal trucks, Cody ran 20s and 37s on his last truck. No complaints.
Last 2 trucks, actually, yeah.
My last one had 17s and 37s. My new one's about to have 20s and 38s. So you still get a great ride with these setups, but with 20s and 37s, you have to be more mindful of tire pressure. So it's very critical to run, lower tire pressure with less sidewall to help kind of offset that basically that smaller sidewall on there.
Yeah, all that goes out. All of this discussion goes out the window if you're airing any MT, AT, or even an RT tire, these hybrid tires. If you're airing them up to 65 psi, or God forbid the 80 psi that they're not even rated for, it's going to ride horrible. So we're going to be dropping a whole nother video talking about tire pressure and all that stuff shortly. But yeah, keep in mind, once you're in the wrong pressure range, no combinations is going to ride good. So yeah.
These aftermarket tires do have a lot thicker sidewalls than the factory ones. The factory ones are meant to run high pressures. That's why, and they'll still flex because they're softer sidewalls. These aftermarket tires, you really don't want to do that if ride quality is a consideration, or even tire longevity due to tire wear. Again, we're going to talk about that in an upcoming video. But I'd say there isn't necessarily a wrong answer, because a lot of guys do like the look of 20s and 37s. You can still achieve a great ride. But if ride quality is strictly the biggest factor you're looking for, and you're trying to get the absolute best that your truck has to offer, I'd say 17s and 37s are going to be the way to go.
Yep, more rubber is always going to be better, but as we get this call multiple times a day as well, it's like picking shoes. I can't tell you what shoes to wear. Pick what you think looks cool, what you like, and have fun. That's what this hobby is all about. All right, so the final question is premium suspension like Carli and Thuren, is it worth it? Because there's so many other brands out there. A couple of them have 2 and 3 letter acronyms. Are they worth it? Is this price gap, is it worth it? And if you really are subjective and you do an apples to apples comparison of what comes with the kits, very few kits come with as many components that, like, say, Carli suspension includes on a 2014 Ram truck, right? They have all of the small parts required to just make this kit function well. Some of these other companies leave off brake lines for brake line tabs. They use drop pitman arms. They use track bar drops instead of replacement track bars, and all these other things, and it really results in a poorer experience and poorer longevity for you. So many guys we see, will come into our shop and they've bought a water separator. Most of these new trucks have water separators built in. Like, they literally have it built in. You're chopping up your fuel system. You're spending all this money, this labor, doing things like that. Guys will come in with, fully forged wheels and all these other things, and they're spending thousands of dollars, even fuel additives. It's amazing what guys will spend on fuel additives, but then they have, some guys will actually spend more on fuel additives than their spacer, right? Like, a spacer kit's $65, and they'll have more in additives that they put in their fuel, every year. And it's like, you're riding in that truck daily, especially if you're even using it for a work truck, hot shots, things like that. There's been a huge influx of hot shot trucks we've been selling parts for, like 450s, because those guys make a living in their truck and they spend every moment in it. Why ride on like a bucking Bronco the whole way, And so, yeah, I think it's 100% worth it. You're going to be driving in it, you're commuting in it. Even if you're not working in it, the ride is so far improved. You're not going to be replacing, track bars, things like that, consistently. Even since we've started doing YouTube, there's almost one comment on every video. Hey, I have, brand XYZ track bar. how do I fix it? And I couldn't even tell you because half these companies don't even sell replacement parts. You know, it's crazy. A premium part is going to last you a lot longer. It's going to cost you less in the long run, less mechanic shop bills, things like that. And, you know, you're going to be more comfortable along the way.
Yep. So, yeah, like I was saying, few things are going to offer the seat of the pants value for the money spent that a quality suspension will. And that's, I think, really the point we're trying to drive home here is that, you know, there's so many things you buy that are kind of snake, I wouldn't say snake oil because I'm not going to put down other people's products. It's not everything is, but, you know.
But there's very few you can actually feel.
Right.
Like a cold air intake. How many guys in the diesel community have cold air intakes?
Yeah.
Like thousands. How many people have spacers that are literally riding like this going down the highway? Also thousands. Just food for thought. We think it's definitely like a worthwhile investment on a truck you're going to keep and a truck that costs you as much as these new ones do. Well, cool. We hope you found this informative. We got really good engagement from our last question and answer session, so we think you guys are really digging this. Again, any further questions, things like that, if you didn't get a chance to message us on social media, comment down below. We are keeping track of these things, and we will keep doing these videos from here on out to give just a candid, I guess, you know, honest, our personal opinions on the subject. So yeah, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. We do have a lot of stuff cool, you know, a lot of cool stuff coming out, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.